I didn't really care about the accolades because I didn't do it for the accolades. I did it because I didn't want to let my teammates down. When you talk about the NFF, I strongly believe, LaVar, in college is an opportunity for higher education, but the opportunity comes around. It's rare for anybody to be bestowed an opportunity for a scholarship or an opportunity for an education at a higher level. And something that the NFF has held and has caused very close to my and dear to my heart is that it keeps that level of intensity and push on education. The Maxwell Awards and all the other accolades. When I'm seeing some of these football players with some of these GPAs and some of these majors, my jaw just drops.
What's up, everybody? It's LaVar Arrington here, and on this edition of Good in the Game, I bring on my guy, one of the dopest dudes you'll ever meet, super strong, amazing football player on the football field, played for the Washington Huskies, then was drafted 9th overall to, in 1993 to the Atlanta Falcons. This dude ends up in Oakland and had an amazing Pro Bowl, all-pro career. But we're going to talk about life as well. So here we go. Lincoln Kennedy. That's right. Good in the Game. National Football Foundation. LaVar Arrington. 1, 2, 3. Or was it 3, 2, 1? Bam. Here we go. Big Link. Lincoln Kennedy. Having you on the show and talking to you about what's good in the game, I got to start off by asking, how has the game of football impacted you? When you think of what's good in the game, what does Lincoln Kennedy think of?
Well, I think of it as an opportunity for young men and women to be able to get out of the inner city, an opportunity to get an education. That's what football brought to me when I was young. I had no idea how I was going to get out of the back streets of San Diego before I went on to college, and didn't know how I was going to afford it. And then playing sports turned that around for me. I was not a sports kid growing up. I was involved with music. And then it wasn't until my high school coach saw me running around high school and told me that I was coming out for football that changed my life. So as far as the good of the game goes, I think it provides opportunities for young men and women. And because football is growing, you see it in flag football, the women part of it is growing. It's becoming more popular. That's why I'm including them in the statement. But football, I think, is a great game. It's a team chemistry game that builds you for the future, LaVar. More importantly, shows you how to work together, which, let's face it, that's what you need to do in this world today.
You are one of the most diverse dudes I've met. You're polished. You're able to communicate in a way that is very distinguished. I think if you ask any of us within our football community, who's one of the dudes you look to as like a role model and handles things the right way, your name is immediately one of the names that comes up. How did you develop such a clear, distinctive way of basically impacting people through the way you communicate with them?
Well, first of all, thank you. Very nice and kind words. I really appreciate it, especially coming from you. And by the way, before I miss, but congratulations on your recent induction into the College Football Hall of Fame. Welcome to the family.
Appreciate it.
I'm right there with you. So
indeed.
I'm most happy for you. Long overdue.
We're going to get there.
Absolutely.
We're going to get to that.
But I'm just saying it before I forget, because sometimes these offensive line memories don't last me that long. So here's the thing, LaVar. My mother was an advocate of education, or still is. And every day I saw her, she would reward me with the same, announcement every day. She's like, never stop learning. And so that was first and foremost. Secondly, something that disturbed me, that bothered me a great deal as we were growing up, is that people would constantly reflect to the color of our skin, being unable to communicate. And it bothered the hell out of me, to be honest with you, bro, because I hate when somebody would say, well, you don't sound black. Or I hate you're so well spoken. I mean,
right.
You know what I mean? It's like, because I cherish education, because I know how to communicate, does that make me? I don't necessarily think I'm special, but it just makes me a slightly bit different. But the biggest thing for me, LaVar, is when as I was coming up playing this game, I never wanted to be referred to as a football player. I wanted to
Mm,
be referred to as a guy who played football, and there's a big
mhm.
difference. You
There
see,
is.
I'm more well rounded. I'm more. I like to experiment with things. It's one of the reasons why I went into sports talk radio is because when I was working with the NFL Network 4 days a week, working with Rich Eisen and those guys, all we were doing is talking about football all day. It got boring.
Mhm.
It gets old, gets stale. How many times you want to announce when Brett Favre is going to retire? No, I don't care. I
Right.
don't know. You know what I mean? It is what it is. But I say that to say this. When I went into sports talk radio, it allowed me to become more well-rounded because it forced me
Mhm.
to study other sports. I had to study
Mhm.
golf. I had to study NASCAR. I had to study tennis. I didn't know anything of those sports. My first love was basketball. Second love was football. So I had to learn all those other sports. That was a challenge to me. And then,
Mhm.
the great John Madden, may he rest in peace, told me when I first got into the industry, he's like, you have to develop your own voice, Lincoln. And what he meant by that
Mm.
is that everybody wants to talk behind the mic. Everybody wants to act like they know what they're talking about. Football's not a
Mhm.
complex game. It's not something that people can't do. I mean, anybody can do it if you can hold a conversation, but you have to develop your voice, and that's what I've been working on my career to do, LaVar.
That is awesome, man. All right, so you mentioned the NFF. Obviously, this is a National Football Foundation podcast that I'm doing. Talk about your connection with the NFF. You talked about education that reflects a foundational piece of the National Football Foundation. A real commitment to being great. That's a foundational piece of the National Football Foundation. Just talk about the National Football Foundation and what it's represented in well, obviously that you showed them the hardware, but your connection with the NFF and the National Football Foundation College Football Hall of Fame.
Well, I was stunned back in 2015 when I got the phone call about being inducted, and I actually thought it was a joke. To be honest with you, I thought it was a joke. I thought somebody was playing a joke on me, and I couldn't believe it. But the thing is that we both have had successful playing careers, and that success is measured everyone differently. I measure success on being able to do it for double digit years. I didn't really care about the accolades because I didn't do it for the accolades. I did it because I didn't want to let my teammates down. So I say that to say this: when you talk about the NFF, and I'm part of a couple of the committees and stuff like that, I strongly believe, LaVar, in college as an opportunity for higher education, but it doesn't necessarily apply to everyone. Everyone's not going to make it in college. And some people have got to be refrigerator workers. Some people have got to be ditch diggers. And it's just the
Mhm.
way the thing is. But the opportunity comes around. It's rare for anybody to be stowed an opportunity for a scholarship or an opportunity for an education at a higher level. And something that the NFF has held and has caused very close to my and dear to my heart is that it keeps that level of intensity and push on education. The Maxwell Awards
Mhm.
and all the other accolades. When I'm seeing some of these football players with some of these GPAs and some of these majors, my jaw just drops. I'm like, political, biodegradable science and getting a 4.0.
Right.
I'm like, come on now. But you know what? I commend
Right.
those guys and those people able to do it. So that's something the NFL has been near and dear to me, building a relationship, allowing it to grow. And because I do care a lot about the game of football, I want to see the future shine bright.
I love that. All right. Now I got to throw this one out at you. How did you end up in San Diego? You mentioned being in San Diego, but I'm a PA guy, and
I
even
know.
though it's the eastern side, you was in York. They
Yes.
brought you in this world in York. How
Yeah.
how did you end up in York, and how did you end up in San Diego? How did that work?
Navy brat. My dad joined the military when I was young. We moved out to San Diego and I was raised there. I still got
Okay.
about three generations on both sides of my family back in York, PA, and Central PA. So I do miss home. I do miss PA. I try to get back there as often as possible. But hey, there's a lot of big things that came out of PA when it comes to football, especially Western PA.
Indeed.
You know that for sure. So yeah, it's a
Indeed.
lot of rich history. Just glad to be a part of it.
That's awesome, man. And shouts out to our military.
Absolutely.
Always, always love and respect for them. All right, so let's talk about this. You end up on the West Coast, you play ball. We can't we can't just talk about life without going into your football career because Well, you were a dog, man, and literally and figuratively, you were a dog. You went to Washington, um, you played for the Huskies, and I gotta tell you, when Napoleon Kaufman is the third, fourth option running back on a dominant team such as yours, and he and in fact, Mark Brunell is a backup
Yeah.
on that team. And you got a guy like Mark Bruner
Yeah.
on that team. And man, you guys had so many studs. You had Fields, who we'll
Mhm.
touch on that one too,
Yeah.
by the way. LB, one of my favorite LBs, by the way. Um, you have so many amazing ball players on one team, and there's Lincoln Kennedy on there as well. How how was that experience for you? Like to be on such an amazing team that ends up on top.
To be honest, bro, I didn't realize how good we were. I mean, you got to
Wow.
understand something. As I said earlier, I didn't grow up playing sports, so
Mhm.
I didn't know what was a good team, what was a bad team. I mean, I know the wins and losses. I'm not stupid like that, but that
Right.
doesn't necessarily determine if it's a good team. Wins and losses, the records is. But I say this, I wanted to go to Washington because I wanted to get out of California. I took a trip to USC, didn't care too much for it. Took a trip to UCLA, didn't care for it. Didn't think I could get in Stanford. Didn't think I could qualify for Stanford. Cal didn't have a football program. I wasn't going to be a Duck. I wasn't going to be a Beaver. My first love was actually Michigan until I found out that they were just trying to recruit me to put me on offensive line. They're going to switch me on offensive line because I don't know if you know this, but I was recruited as a
You were
defensive end,
D line.
defensive guy. Yeah,
Yeah.
D line. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
My favorite player watching once I got into football, the reason why I'm wearing 72 is that Too Tall Jones from the Cowboys because I could
Wow.
relate with him. I was always taller than
Okay.
everybody else. I
Always
relate with him.
taller.
So
Right.
yeah, so that was my sort of gauge to what football was. And then the first year went to Washington, my redshirt year, '88. I think we went 6-5, couldn't beat anybody really. Don James came in and had a team meeting and said, "We're changing up everything." And he came to me and he says, "You can stay on defense, but you're probably not going to play. There's an opportunity for you on offense." And I went home and called my high school coach, John Shacklett, who was my mentor back then, LaVar, and he knew more about football than I did. So I always relied on him. And he had
Yeah.
played a little bit in the league too. And he said, "Look, Link, if you go over to the offensive side, one day you'll be a high draft choice and be an all pro." And I was like, "Really?" And again, not knowing what I was into and not knowing how it was, my biggest thing, LeVar, is I never want to let my teammates down. So I always
Sure.
went out there with the effort that I'm not going to get beat today because you're not going to be my assignment that gets to the ball carrier, the quarterback, or anything like that. So I think I think as a team, unanimously across the board, we did a lot of that. That's one of the reasons why we were so successful.
It was a special team, boy. I tell you that.
True story.
All right, and I mentioned Jamie Fields,
Yeah, man,
dope linebacker, man. So such a
just a beast.
tragic deal.
Yeah,
He loses his life in a car accident.
yeah,
Um, but man, did he have an impact on guys like myself who were coming behind you guys
yeah.
in terms of, I'm in high school
Hmm.
and I'm watching you guys. I mean, that was unheard of to be on the East Coast
Yeah.
and actually knowing really good ball players from Washington.
Oh yeah.
That's how I got
Hmm.
introduced to pack football.
Hmm.
So just give me a memory on Jamie because man, I have such fond memories of watching him play, but never met him, never
Yeah.
knew him, just like the player that he was.
Well, Jaime and I, we came out of Southern California. He was from LA, came out of Southern California around and same time, 1988. So we both got to Washington the same year, along with Steve Ettman and Dave Hoffman and Mark Brunell and all those guys, Darius Turner, all those guys. We all came in the same year. So that was our freshman class.
So that's
Hi-
how you say it, Jaime?
yeah, Jaime.
I've been calling him
It's
Jamie
all good.
all
It's
this
all good.
time.
It's all good.
All right.
It's all good.
Dang,
He was he
Jaime.
was he was a great guy. He was
Yeah.
one of those. Jaime was one of those guys that was silent, but you knew about him because he walked in the room and he just had this presence about him that everybody sort of tried to gravitate and make sure they know where he is at all times. And I used to kid with him because I used to think that he used to scare girls and to give him his number. Give me your number, and they would okay.
Okay.
But
Right.
Jaime was a great guy, and yeah, he was. It was a tragedy to have such a good guy and a great athlete lost at such a young age.
Yeah, man. That's sad, but man, he was a baller. He
Yeah,
was
no
a
doubt.
baller. All right, so you mentioned changing sides of the ball,
Right.
going going into the trenches on the other side. And then you go to the pros and you were an all pro. You were a pro bowler. You had a distinguished career
Thank you.
as a pro. Absolutely. Just talk a little bit about what what that was like, and if you were to give any, words of wisdom as it applies to playing the game, what went into your preparation to be what you ultimately ended up becoming, a anchor, a stalwart for the teams that you played on?
Well, this is like a preacher talking to the choir because you've experienced it yourself. You know how much the game changes when we go from the collegiate level to the professional level, and how they don't necessarily prepare you for it. They just kind of throw you into the fire and let you figure it out. And you either sink or swim.
Mhm.
So I don't have to tell you, you already know. But for me, it came like this. I only had the pleasure of playing for two teams. I was originally drafted by the Falcons in '93, and it was a different ownership. It wasn't Arthur Blank; it was the Five Smiths back then. And then ended up getting traded over to the Raiders. And I'm so thankful that Al Davis came and got me while he was still alive, because I was not having a good time in Atlanta and I was not playing.
Mm.
And my career probably would have been very different in Atlanta if it wasn't for the trade and the change. And this is things that, I know it's sort of customized these days with as many people are changing teams and free agents and all that stuff, and even the college level.
But
But
it
back
wasn't like
then,
that
it
back
wasn't like
then.
that. That's exactly right.
Right,
So back then,
right.
it didn't wasn't always the plan to be or it's going to work out. So that was a big step for me. And when
Mhm.
I got over to the other side and I got over to the Raiders, I'm still in Oakland, and I remember talking and having a conversation with Al Davis, and he said, now that I'm here, I said, I'm going to be the player. And he says, I know that you're capable of being a player. Just get out there and show us. And so from that point, LaVar, I never looked back because I never wanted to come off the football field. That's how I was. And my goal when I first started playing, I said, you know what? I just threw out a number. I said 12 because my birthday's on the 12th. And I was like, 12 years. If I can get 12 years, I got 11. So I came up one short, but no regrets. Definitely pleased. It's afforded me a lifestyle. It's afforded me a career afterwards. And I really can't complain about it. It was a good career.
Let's talk about that before we get up out of here.
Uh huh.
The post career, to me, post life is it might be more important. It's longer for
Yes,
certain
no
than
doubt.
what your career is going to be if you're blessed enough to live long enough. Um, your post career accolades are phenomenal as well. And you
Well, thank
touched
you.
on it a little bit earlier in us talking, but I want to revisit it. You leave the game, you go straight into media? How did it work out? Talk to me about career in terms of how you decided to get into doing media, but also talk to me about if you're doing anything that is community driven, because one of the things that super important for me has always been to be a person in my communities, serving my
Certainly.
communities. I'm a military kid like
Hmm.
yourself,
Hmm.
so I'm super active with the
Hmm.
military. I'm into first responders, and I'm into youth. It's better to build them up than to try to fix them. You know
Certainly.
what I mean? So anyway, just talk to me about that, because obviously you're a natural with how you communicate. You don't sound like an athlete, you know what I mean? But talk to me a little bit about how you got into, the profession. How has life been post football playing career?
Well, prefacing the statement by saying this, what I've come to realize, and I was also the chapter president for the retired players chapter here in Phoenix and did some stuff back in the days as a representative. But what I've come to realize, the biggest challenge for us athletes, especially if you spend any time on the professional level, is learn how to dwell and live without the spotlight shining on you. Because you
Mm,
think about this, LaVar, we came through it together. You go through a big time program, everything's regimented. You are the star, you are the cat's meow. You go on to the next level. For a short time, you're the cat's meow. But you know the game is only for the people who are currently in the game. So once you hang up your cleats, people will start to forget about you. And it's
Quick.
been my experience that a lot of guys don't know how to handle that. Don't know how to handle when the light goes off. Don't know how to handle that they're no longer the cat's meow. And I think that's why you see the statistics that you do in so many different ways about broken families, divorces, and stuff like that. So for me, I didn't know the writing was on the wall until I actually decided to read it as far as going into the media, because I had no idea what I was going to do. I had said earlier I wanted to play 12 years. In my 11th year, second to last or third to the last game, I tore my tricep. And when the doctor told me, when he put his finger in my arm and went all the way to my bone, he's like, "You tore your tricep." And I asked him, "How long was that going to be?" He's like, "Well, about 6 to 8 weeks." That's when I said, "I'm retiring. I'm done. I don't want to do it anymore. I don't want to rehab anymore. I don't want to go through this anymore. The game's changing. I don't like these guys. A lot of guys I'm playing with, all this stuff." So I didn't know what I was going to do. Didn't have any idea what I was going to do. I made the mention that I was going to retire. Had my doubts whether or not I could regret it, if there was something I could do. But long story short, the NFL Network approached me, and they came with a contract, and they told me how much I can make to do 4 days a week and talk football. I was like, shit. Excuse my language.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, hey,
No
hey,
brainer.
that's how the spirit moved you.
Exactly. It's like,
I had that same offer at one point, so I know what you're talking about.
Yes, yeah. So you see,
And I
was like,
reacted
okay.
the same way.
So here we are. Here's the thing. We're young in our life. We're in our 30s, and times have changed and stuff like that. But it's like, what are we going to do? And so I went into it. Didn't know how I was going to feel about it. Didn't know I was going to like it or not like it or whatever. But it started the journey to where I am today.
That's awesome. And like you said, now you're doing sports radio
Yeah.
talk. How does that? It's very different than
Very
television.
different.
Television structurally is very different. Formatically, it's very different. How did you settle in? Because for me as well, I settled more in on radio because
Right.
of obviously creative freedoms.
Yeah.
That you have more creative freedom and you're able to paint a picture with what you say with your words instead of try to give an explanation as quickly as you possibly can in some situations in TV. How has it been different for you, and how did it settle in on? I think you alluded to it, that what you could talk about, but how did it manifest for you to go sports radio?
Well, it was sitting on the principles of those very same freedoms that you spoke of. I got tired of hearing executive directors and executive producers saying that, "Oh, Lincoln, I don't like the way you and LaVar look. Let's put LaVar and such together for no
Yeah,
reason." So,
yeah.
here's the thing. I told people that I was involved with in television back in the day. I said, when I was starting to play football, we had to go to practice. We had to learn the plays. We had to learn how to play with one another. You walk into this world of entertainment, they give you a script. Sometimes they want to censor you. Sometimes they tell you what they want you to say, and sometimes they don't. Other times than not, you're just fending for your own. A production meeting is your practice, not a whole lot of preparation. You see, I need a little bit more than that. And so not having that, I mean, there was the possibility, eventually grew, because this is back then when the internet was just starting, but now to where it's now, you have the access to the information all at your disposal. But I wanted more. I wanted more feedback. What can I do better? What can I do more of? What should I be doing? What should I be talking about? Am I too much? Am I too little? Didn't get that. Lost its lore. TV lost its lore for me. Going into radio, I had a little bit more time. And going into radio, I could not only prepare more, but I could build a certain chemistry that you can't get when you're sitting next to somebody on a TV screen, a chemistry that you get like we're communicating now. Because you have that banter, that conversation that goes back and forth, which promotes good radio. You see what I'm saying? Doesn't always promote good TV, because people get impatient. They want a picture.
They want a picture. Yeah, they want something moving. They want moving video. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, you're right.
So you have that freedom with radio that you don't have in TV. And that was one of the things that drew me to it, in all honesty. And it also came to the realization that, look, TV obviously pays more than radio, but you know what? I'm okay. I'm a humble
Mhm.
man. I've got 4
Sure.
kids that are well
I hear
taken
you.
care of, you know what I mean? I've got
Yeah,
enough space around me. I don't need to be extravagant. I don't need to shine. Do I like nice stuff? Absolutely. Have I had nice stuff? Absolutely.
sure.
Do I need it? No, don't need it.
Right. No, I hear you, man. But radio does have, especially now, it does have its benefits to being good at doing it. So,
Certainly.
all right, community service.
Yeah.
Anything in particular that you represent before we let you get up out of here?
Well, I own 2 restaurants. I have one here in Phoenix, also have one in Vegas. We do a Cajun seafood boil, and I've always been a big foodie, as you can tell, I'm big as a house. Big foodie guy. So food I have always equated with love and brings people together. I have been working a little bit with my son's football teams. My youngest son is in high school, sophomore football team, working a little bit with him, but not much, taking a step back. I want to let those guys do it and those people do their jobs. I'm not trying to circumvent them, but other than that, and had an insurance agency for a few years, kind of shut that down. Had a cigar business for a few years, shut that down. I'm always dwelling in other things, so there's
Mm-hmm.
nothing ever for sure. But as far as
Mm-hmm.
community, the extent of community goes with the NFF, being on a couple of boards, deciding some of the people that are coming in, because that's a real big deal to me, and programs
Indeed,
that
it's
affect
a
the
big
game
deal.
around the country.
That is awesome. And you're awesome. And that's
I
Lincoln
appreciate it,
Kennedy,
brother.
everybody. The great Lincoln Kennedy. And you know him as a Washington Husky and most well known in league circles as an Oakland, not Las Vegas, y'all,
That's right.
an Oakland Raider. So I appreciate you coming on, man, taking a little time out for us. Any social media handles you want to throw out there?
L Kennedy 72 is Twitter. Lincoln.Kennedy.72 is Instagram. Don't have a big presence on social
Okay.
media. I haven't grown that far yet. But
All right.
congratulations to you and your podcast. And most importantly, like I
Thank you.
said earlier, coming into the hall, it's definitely good to have you.
I
But
appreciate
I
you.
mean, I really appreciate you having me on your show, man. I really do.
Indeed, man. Hey, look here. The show got better. The credibility got better. It went up by
Oh man.
having you on the show. So appreciate you taking the time, Link.
Anytime, partner. I appreciate it.
All right. Y'all heard it here. That's Lincoln Kennedy. I'm LaVar Arrington. This is Good in the Game, National Football Foundation. Make sure you stay locked in. We'll catch you next week, next show, next time. Be well, y'all.